This is apropos. Well, it comes as Israel has for weeks now been trying to ratchet up pressure on Hamas to get the militant group to agree to its terms in ceasefire negotiations. And ahead of the US president's expected visit to the Middle East this month, Israel has approved plans to effectively seize the Gaza Strip and to stay in the Palestinian territory for an unspecified amount of time, while also controlling aid to the besieged enclave. Details of the plan, which will see tens of thousands of reservists being called up, were not formally announced, and its exact timing and implementation remain unclear. With the latest, here's Emerald Maxwell.
All day, vehicles have arrived at this military drafting station in northern Israel after tens of thousands of reservists were called up as part of Israeli plans to expand the operation in Gaza. In a video posted on X, Prime Minister Netanyahu said the new offensive would be intensive, but stopped short of detailing just how much of Gaza's territory would be seized.
We decided on a powerful operation in Gaza. This was the recommendation of the Chief of Staff to, as he said, defeat Hamas. Gaza's population will be moved for its own protection.
A move that would likely amount to forcible displacement. Already in control of around a third of Gaza's territory, Israel says the expansion will help bring back hostages. But their families don't buy it. They protested against the plan at Israel's parliament, calling instead for a ceasefire deal. The mother of one hostage called on soldiers not to report for reserve duty for ethical reasons.
We are all under the understanding that the continuation of the war will not bring the hostages back. We have seen that hostages die during warfare.
Israel ended the last ceasefire with Hamas in March, after which it resumed attacks on the Strip and imposed a total aid blockade. Surveys show dwindling public support for the war among Israelis, but in Jerusalem Monday, some expressed support for its expansion.
I think as an Israeli citizen that it's a smart move to finally address the root problem properly. Unfortunately, we can't really have peace with the other side.
I think enough innocent people have died. And I do not really trust our government.
An Israeli defense official says the expansion won't happen before Donald Trump's visit to the region next week, allowing for the possibility that Israel might agree to a ceasefire in the meantime.
For more, we're joined now by Amnon Aran, Professor of International Politics of the Middle East at City University of London. Thanks so much, Professor, for being with us on the programme this evening. In your view, what exactly is Israel's goal here, and why is this happening now?
I think in the first instance, the Israeli goal is really to try and increase, in their words, the pressure on Hamas. As your report specified, there hasn't been yet a decided date for the next offensive. And it could be, although it's not entirely likely, a situation where some sort of deal would be reached between Israel and Hamas. I think the Israelis have made this announcement to try and increase the pressure and hopefully, from their point of view, reach a deal on their terms. But it is entirely unclear that this very last step will achieve that goal.
And we saw some of the reaction in Israel in that report just a couple of moments ago. How much pressure is Netanyahu coming under at home, both from the public, the families of the hostages, and elements of his own hard right government, those harder right, more conservative elements within his own cabinet?
So I think here we have to separate. Netanyahu is under intense pressure from his hard right cabinet coalition partners, especially Mr. Bezalel Smotrich and Mr. Ben Gvir, who have stated time and time again that from their point of view, the priority, and Bezalel Smotrich mentioned this, the priority in his words is to defeat Hamas, and that comes before releasing the hostages. So from his partners, Netanyahu is under immense pressure, and they could topple the government on that basis. But on the other hand, the Israeli public is much more divided. There is a very strong opposition, consistent in Israel, to this move, and they are actually arguing against it and want, as your report suggested, to end the war in return for a complete release of all the hostages. Having said that, group in Israel who have been persuaded by Netanyahu's argument that Israel can, through this next offensive, actually defeat Hamas. So the Israeli public is divided. The coalition partners, the
I think we're just having some difficulties there connecting with Amnon. Unfortunately, perhaps we might be able to attempt to get back in touch with him a little later in the programme. But
now?
oh, you can hear us okay, Amnon? Can you? Sorry for disrupting you there, interrupting. We just thought we'd lost the signal. Talk to us a little bit about how much of a difference all of this is going to make on the ground, these additional troops who are going to be called up. What kind of actual difference is it going to make in terms of the fighting? And what we're seeing and hearing being announced by the Israeli Prime Minister, is that essentially Israel saying that what it's been doing so far hasn't been working?
Well, yes, absolutely. First of all, it is saying that what Israel has been doing up until now in terms of releasing all the hostages has not been working, and therefore the army has recommended to take this to the next level, to increase it quite significantly. In terms of the fighting, this will be a very dramatic, if it will take place, it will have a very dramatic effect on the Gaza Strip. The humanitarian zones will shrink even more than they are now. There will be much more displacement, forced displacement, and all this against the background of 7 weeks already where aid and commercial products have been held, which of course begs the question also about why Hamas are giving the Israelis this opportunity, quote unquote, to carry out this massive offensive. But this will be a dramatic change to what we have seen over the past few weeks, which has already been very, very significant indeed, including the cutting off of Rafah and Khan Yunis from the rest of the Strip.
And do you think that there is actually any chance that it is going to force Hamas to start making concessions?
It is very difficult to say. We really don't know what's happening in Hamas. We don't know exactly how the leadership is working. So far, we have not seen this taking place because there's a basic contradiction as far as Hamas is concerned. From the point of view of Hamas, if it returns all the hostages to Israel without an Israeli commitment to end the war, Hamas remains fully exposed. On the other hand, if Israel agrees to receive all the hostages in exchange for ending the war, the Netanyahu government will come under intense criticism that it has led the country for a year and 7 months and has not been able to achieve its goals. This contradiction has been there already for a year. It hasn't changed, and in my view, therefore, this very latest move will not resolve it. In other words, Hamas and Israel are facing this face contradiction, and we will have to see how that really plays out.
And it's coming as well, this announcement, if we talk a little bit more about the timing of it, ahead of this visit that Donald Trump is going to be making to the wider Middle East region. He won't be visiting Israel. Is Israel, though, trying to use this as some kind of leverage over Hamas?
Yes, absolutely. There is a leverage over Hamas. The leverage is very much the military leverage, but also crucially, the Israeli threat of this time, any territory that they take over, they said, will not be returned, as was the case in the previous deal. So the Israelis are doing something new here in two respects. Firstly, they are again going to deploy a very, very significant size of forces, something that we have not seen for a very, very long time. And the second is that the territories that will be taken over by the IDF, the Israelis have said, will not be subject to negotiation. And that will de facto shrink the size of the Gaza Strip and the area under the control of Hamas. My sense is that this is in coordination with the United States. And the fact that Donald Trump will be visiting or may be visiting the region is a bit immaterial because the Israelis will probably start the offensive after he completes his visit and not during the visit.
And what kind of influence at this point do you think Donald Trump has over Netanyahu? There are reports suggesting that the two don't have the same stance when it comes to things like whether or not to strike Iran and whether to allow humanitarian aid back into Gaza.
Well, I think Donald Trump still has immense influence over Benjamin Netanyahu. We've seen this most clearly with his decision to begin negotiations with Iran. This is in complete opposition to the stance Netanyahu has been adopted for the last decade and a half. So in this sense, Donald Trump has completely, if you like, sidetracked and marginalized Benjamin Netanyahu. And if Donald Trump would decide that the priority is now to again provide or to renew the transfer of aid and commercial products to the Gaza Strip, my sense is that the Israeli government would be under intense pressure. The balance of power so far still leans towards the American president when it comes to his relationship with Benjamin Netanyahu.
And Amnon, you referred to the humanitarian situation in Gaza a little earlier. There are concerns that Israel will now only be allowing aid to a few kind of concentration hubs in the south, forcing people to move in order to get help. But is such a system, would that even be, one, workable and two, legal?
Well, I think in terms of workability, it very much depends how one defines that. I think the bottom line is that the situation in Gaza has been dire over the last 7 weeks. It has further deteriorated since the Israelis have renewed the attacks, and any further expansion of the Israeli offensive will definitely worsen the situation much further, especially when the aid and commercial products, their availability will decrease. And of course, the humanitarian space available will shrink even further. So this will no doubt will make things exponentially more difficult in the Gaza Strip. I mean, whether the legality of it is concerned, I think this is something that we would be able to judge after the Israelis begin their attack. We've had already various rulings on this, but it is impossible to say before we actually know what has happened regarding the legality of it.
And if this does lead to a permanent occupation of Gaza, if that is what we are seeing here, and if that is the direction Israel is moving in, what kind of reaction would you expect then from the international community to such a move?
Well, I think we're going to see a divided response. I think definitely European countries have already made it very clear, especially Western European countries, the EU, that from their point of view, this would be unacceptable. I think when we move out to other sort of, if you like, nodes of power, there it might be differential. I think the American view might be to wait and see. My sense is that the Israelis are still fully coordinated with the Americans when it comes to the Gaza Strip. But, when we move further east to places like Russia, of course, would find it very difficult to the Israelis of occupying Gaza, given their occupation of areas of Ukraine. And China has been relatively silent on the conflict, apart from some condemnations. I think the interesting thing to see will be to look at some of the Arab states. So far, they have been relatively less vociferous in comparison, for example, to a country like Turkey. If the Israelis announce of a reoccupation of the Gaza Strip, I think the Arab world, and especially the Arab League, Arab states, would be probably the most important, or one of the most important constituencies I would look to.
Amnon, we'll have to leave it there for now. Thanks so much for being with us on the programme, though. That's Amnon Aran, Professor of International Politics at City University of London.